I'm going to start this video out by saying I love cannabis. We've been in a relationship for the past decade of my life. We got together while I was in high school, and since then I've been infatuated with just how many benefits it can bring to my life. I love the fact that it opens up my mind to see life from a higher perspective. It sparks my creativity, helping me create new cool shit. It's a great social lubricant and always makes a get-together with the homies a bit more fun and interesting. It helps me feel closer to God, opening my eyes a little bit to the fact that I am a part of everything around me. My point being that I love cannabis. However, I have had to own up to the fact that I had been abusing it for too long. And even though it gives me all of these benefits, as I abused it over time, I started experiencing diminishing returns. And as I've grown from a teenager in high school to a 27-year-old with real life responsibilities, not only did the benefits I loved start to fade, but they got replaced. Instead of feeling like it opened my mind, I feel like I just needed it to feel normal. Instead of being a great social lubricant, it became something that I mainly just did alone, and I would feel the shame of being high in public, worried if I smelled or if my eyes were red, etc. Now, it still gave me the creative sparks, but when it was time to actually sit down and put in the work for the creative process, I'd find myself too tired and groggy to show up and give it my best, leaving me with a bunch of projects that I would start and not finish, and eventually I'd just procrastinate on not only creative projects, but actual things that I wanted to do with my life. And lastly, it just ended up becoming an addictive coping mechanism. I needed it just to make it through the day, knowing I would crash out if I didn't have my fix at my normal times of day. And unknowingly, I was in the loop of addiction, continuously justifying my use to myself, especially since it had become such a big part of my identity. So I decided to do something about it, not blaming cannabis for making me this way, but transforming and really repairing my relationship with it. And I'm proud to say that I have now gone from smoking all day to just smoking twice a week, something I thought was completely impossible before. And so in this video, I want to share with you the things that I did to be able to repair my relationship with cannabis. And if you have the same intention, hopefully you can try and implement them in your life as well. So the first thing that I did was I sought to understand the cycle. This was a pretty important place to start for me because my final quit attempt most certainly wasn't my first. And I kept repeating the same pattern. I'd realize it wasn't helping, I'd try to stop, and somehow I'd end up right back where I started. What I finally understood was that I wasn't just addicted to a substance, I was addicted to a self. A personality that was built around fear, shame, and uncertainty. It turns out my identity was literally wired into my nervous system, and smoking wasn't the root problem. It was just the ritual that kept that identity alive. I had literally trained my brain to link smoking with certain emotional states, and understanding a bit of neuroscience made this a lot clearer for me, that you can become chemically attached to emotions the same way you can to drugs. So my low self-esteem and anxiety weren't just things I felt. They were patterns that I rehearsed until they became familiar to me. And familiar started to feel safe. And so unknowingly, I'd be searching for people, places, and circumstances that would reaffirm those emotions for me so that way I could keep feeling like myself. Learning that blew my mind, but to be honest, it made sense. Smoking became the solution that temporarily quieted the discomfort. But it also reinforced the exact emotions I was trying to escape. So every time I tried to quit without changing who I was being, it felt like I was losing a part of myself, because I was. And once the substance was gone, all that space got filled with the same fear and shame I hadn't outgrown yet. And so I ran back, not for pleasure, but for relief. And so the real breakthrough was realizing that if I wanted a different life, I couldn't just quit the habit. I had to break the habit of being myself. This included taking a hard look at what beliefs I had thought about myself that kept running this program that was addicted to the shame and anxiety and overall fear. I had to then reprogram my subconscious mind through daily affirmation and visualization of the person I wanted to be, and then be so in tune with my mind that I could catch those fear-based thoughts and shame-based thoughts in the moment, stop them, and then reaffirm new thoughts that fit this new identity that I wanted to express. I know that was a lot of information, but if you're interested in walking the same path, I'll put the books that really helped me through this process on screen for a sec. And I'll put them in the description for you as well if you want to check them out. All right, so the next thing I did was go through the process of breaking the cycle. So no matter how you decide to move forward with your relationship to your substance, quitting, moderating, taking a long tea break, whatever you want to do, you have to break the addictive cycle, because you can't make a clear choice from inside a mind that moves based on compulsive thoughts. That cycle always follows the same pattern. Discomfort shows up, your mind searches for relief, you use, you get the temporary relief, and then the same discomfort returns even stronger later. So the first thing to accept is simple but tough. It's gonna suck for a bit, because your brain and your nervous system have to relearn how to regulate themselves naturally. The key is remembering that the discomfort is not a sign that you're failing, it's a sign that your system is recalibrating. That's why you have to keep telling yourself over and over, this is temporary and the reward will be worth it. This is temporary and the reward will be worth it. Because that thought keeps you moving through the wave instead of trying to escape it. The real challenge is the fear-based, addicted voice that shows up in the hard moments and says, this is gonna last forever, or is this even worth it? Those thoughts are simply the addicted voice talking, and its job is to pull you back to the familiar. If you start believing it, you'll interpret your temporary discomfort as permanent. And that's exactly how people end up right back in the loop. But if you can hold strong through this temporary dip in dopamine you're getting, you're going to give your brain proof that you don't need the substance to survive your own emotions. All right, the next thing I did was I focused on building a life that I didn't want to escape from. I think the biggest mistake that people make when trying to overcome an addictive substance is thinking that they can quit and keep living the exact same life. I know I talked about this in the first step, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it and teach you a bit about the science around addiction. So when you use cannabis regularly, your brain starts pairing it with the normal activities of the day, like TV, gaming, work, scrolling, and eating. Over time, the substance becomes the extra reward that your brain starts expecting, so the activity itself stops feeling satisfying by itself. Then you quit, keep the same routines, and suddenly everything feels boring and flat or even depressing. That doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that your brain is recalibrating to a new baseline. I want you to think of your brain like a volume knob for pleasure and motivation. Substances turn the volume up really fast, and then your brain adapts by turning sensitivity down to protect the balance. I hope that made sense, but the point being that what your brain does is it adapts by gaining tolerance. And it's why a normal life can feel kind of muted for a while after you stop. Because with cannabis, your endocannabinoid system is what is getting affected when you use or abuse it. This system is your body's natural balance system, I'd call it. It helps you regulate your mood, stress, sleep, appetite, and just your everyday experience. It truly does a lot. When you're constantly supplying that system with a powerful external arousal, your system then down-regulates its own natural production and your receptors become less responsive. So when you stop, it takes time for the system to find its balance again, which is why the first few weeks to even the first few months can come with low motivation, irritability, restlessness, and just feeling like nothing feels fun, or how a lot of people put it, things used to be more fun when I did them high. The fix isn't just removing the substance, it's rebuilding the reward system. If you keep the same environment and habits with no new sources of healthy reward, your brain just stares at the empty space where the substance used to be, and if you don't do anything about it, it will search for other things to fill that space. And as humans, we often look for the path of least resistance, which is usually how people end up just trading one addiction for another, which is something I'm sure we've all seen before, whether it's another drug or overeating or overspending. A mind that has been trained on easy and cheap dopamine usually looks for easy and cheap dopamine. So then it becomes your job to add new, healthy inputs like working out, breathwork and meditation like I teach, learning a new skill, connecting with good people, and just things that make life feel good that are also helping you move towards the life that you want, not making you move backwards. And this is why I'm harping on building a life you don't want to escape from, because the whole point, for me at least, wasn't just smoke less. It was to stop needing relief from my own routine. The bigger shift was realizing that if my days felt empty, numbing would always be tempting. So I had to make my baseline life more fulfilling. That meant adding real sources of dopamine and peace, like I mentioned before, meditation and breath work, going on walks, playing basketball at the park, designing clothes on my iPad, and especially this, taking my pain and turning it into a purpose-driven mission. Through the process, this quote became my guiding light. In order to go places you haven't been, you have to do things you haven't done. And it wasn't just motivation, it was a commitment, because I wanted my life to look a lot different than it was a year from then. And if I wanted that, I would have to change a lot to get where I wanted to be, because I knew that if nothing changed, nothing would change. And the old life will keep producing the old triggers and subsequently the old habits. But when I changed the way I lived for the better, I didn't have to fight the urges as much because I finally had something better to say yes to. All right, my last point is to be a good parent to yourself. Once I built a life I didn't want to escape from, I started pursuing goals that actually kept me engaged with my life. So then using cannabis stopped being a necessity and became something optional. So that's when I was able to reintroduce it for the benefits I genuinely valued. Like I mentioned before, the creativity, the open-mindedness, the laughter, the connection with God, without needing it to cope. But I didn't just start smoking again because I quit successfully one time. I planned it like an adult who knew how slippery the mind could be. And so I looked at my schedule and chose 2 days a week that made sense for my life. For me, those days happen to be Wednesdays and Saturdays. It does not matter what days you pick. It just needs to make sense with your schedule. And then I treated that as the agreement I was going to hold myself to. Like I said, the exact days don't matter. What matters is making a clear structure that supports your future self. And so from there, I ran it like an experiment, reminding myself that I could adjust the experiment at any time later in the future. But until I did, I was not allowed to negotiate in the moment. Not for birthdays, not for vacations, not for when it felt like I had a hard day, because that's how the old voice sneaks in and starts rewriting the rules. The moment you start bargaining, compulsion gets a seat at the table again. And this approach made it easier because I wasn't constantly debating with myself, something I struggled with for a long time, because I already knew the answer. I didn't have to question it anymore. So I work hard on the days I don't smoke, and on the days I do, I get to actually enjoy it with a clean conscience. And then the best part is that my use isn't tied to the same emotions it was before. Instead of feeling shame and fear and anxiety, I felt excited and present and just generally felt good about the decision because it's a choice that now I'm making, not a pattern that's controlling me. So that, my friends, is how I was able to go from smoking every single day to now just twice a week. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. Because for me, I knew I wanted to change a lot more in my life than just smoking every day. And finally deciding to quit smoking every day gave me the ultimate motivation to pursue what I was procrastinating on. And it gave me a newfound trust in myself that not only was I worthy, but capable of doing the hard things necessary to build myself into the person I could be proud of at the end of the day. And that has now called me to be of service to the people in the world that want to do the same thing, which is why I created Clarity Academy. If you aren't familiar, this is an online cohort where I lead a group of people through their first month of quitting. It applies to people that want to quit both cannabis and nicotine, because I also struggle with vaping, but I give them the knowledge, the tools, and the community that they can use to finally say goodbye to their addictive habits for good this time. So if that's something you may be interested in, go down in the description, click the link, read through the homepage, and if you want, you can sign up for the wait list for the next cohort. I hope this brought you true value, my friend. And if there are any other topics you want me to cover, please let me know down in the comments below. All right, love you, bye.